Capitol Hill and what's going on with his campaign briefly, and then ask a few questions that we have. And hopefully we can be semi-brief so we can give everyone a chance to take a picture and maybe get a quick autograph. I know it's important to everybody. But he's got to be out of here not too long. So, Congressman Paul.
Well, I don't need to. Well, when Jeff told me about starting a new organization, I said, yeah, go ahead. It sounds like a great idea. But I never dreamed he'd be this successful. It's fantastic. And I just think it represents what's going on in the country. As you know, for some reason, the philosophy identifies with young people. And, you know, the other day, I don't know if you noticed, in the Wall Street Journal, there was a major editorial, and they're talking about young people and the Republican Party. And they were saying, how do we get young people like you interested in the Republican Party? And they talked all about the pros and cons and what they did, but they never brought my name up. And I felt insulted, you know, because I know a lot of young people, and of course that's the big thing. Why are young people so interested in the freedom philosophy? But what I usually say when this subject comes up, if I'm anywhere near one of those, you know, average or typical Republican leader, I said, you know, one thing has happened, you know, there's been a lot of interest in what I've been doing, and the young people are fascinated with this, but I've never been asked once by anybody in the Republican Party that's in leadership, why is it that you may be interested in what I'm doing? Maybe they can get a hint on how to get young people, you know, interested in the Republican Party. Maybe the answer is get the Republican Party interested in the freedom philosophy. Yeah. I think that's what happens. That's what is happening, and I have been fascinated that so many have joined and very pleased. And I think that over these last several years, it hasn't been just the college people, the students, but even in early teenagers. And maybe some of you were in that category, you know, 3, 4, 5 years ago, got interested. And young people coming into the office just really fascinates me because they're reading von Mises and they know about the Fed and all these things that, you know, a few years ago it would be just a total dream. So I am very pleased with what Jeff's been doing and what the organization has been doing. And so often, Jeff, when these young people come in the old days, parents would take their kids, you know, to Washington as a civic tour, and sort of drag them in. This is your congressman, meet your congressman, and doing that. And no real interest in know what I was doing. But now these 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old kids come in dragging their parents in. And what I find fascinating, it may have happened with one of you, that the young person got interested, understood what was going on, and with a little help with YouTube and a few other things like that, and they insist that their parents take a look at it, and they win their parents over. And at times I kept thinking, well, would the parents be just a little bit embarrassed, you know, that their 15-year-old is teaching them something about why you ought to look at the Federal Reserve and why we don't need all these senseless wars? But that isn't the case with the parents. The parents always seem so delighted that their child has been interested enough to look into it and study it. And even if they did teach the parent to look at these, so there's something very special going on, and I'm delighted to identify with young people. The other day they asked me about this on one of the programs. I said, well, it's okay. It's a young idea. Freedom is a young idea, and maybe it's appealing to young people. And freedom is a young idea. Really, the testing of freedom, when you look at the history of mankind, which is probably recorded history somewhere 5,000 or 6,000 years of really understanding what history is all about, we've probably only had a couple hundred years of it. And I'm afraid that we've been going in the wrong direction in the last 100 years. So it isn't like we have to invent anything new. We have to look at what we've had, refine it, and work on it and improve it. Because I don't think it's ever appealing that we have to back, a lot of people say, well, yeah, Ron Paul would be a good candidate if it was the 18th century. But I don't like that attitude. I don't even use the term, I want to go back to the gold standard. Well, we had a gold standard, but it wasn't the perfect gold standard. It was a messy gold standard. It was bimetallism, and it didn't prevent the Fed from being created, and it wasn't as market oriented. So there's a lot of things that can be done to improve monetary policy and improve on the principles of liberty. The biggest challenge for all of us today is to not come across as not caring about people, and that is not. I think I sort of understand that, because some who have believed in libertarianism and ideas of individualism have been rather callous about their fellow man. And I don't think that we can sell it, even if it's just for a practical reason. You can't sell what we believe in if you don't have compassion for your fellow man. And that's not difficult, because when you compare, a socialist economy or a Keynesian economy, it ends up the way we were having today. People losing their houses, and we have an inflation, and it's a real mess. So if you understand the freedom philosophy, yes, it's self-centered, because I personally want my freedom. And there's nothing wrong with that. And the benefit from it is it really is the productive system. And then a generous society and a compassionate society certainly mellows the difficulties that happens in any society. But if we start off by giving up on the fact that there has to be a safety net, and you start off with helping that 1% that needs some help, what usually happens is that 1% grows. When you give in and say the 1% needs government authoritarianism to redistribute wealth and tell people what to do with their money, you've sacrificed 100% of the principle, and then it leads to what we have. A little bit of taxation leads to a lot of taxation. A little bit of redistribution of wealth leads to a lot. And the redistribution of wealth doesn't help. It doesn't really accomplish taking from the rich and giving to the poor, which they pretend. It ends up taking from the poor and the middle class, destroying the middle class, and bailing out the very wealthy. And this last bailout is such a demonstration of this. That all the liberal programs to make sure everybody had a house, and all the credit created by the Fed to make sure that there was easy credit, was all designed to help the poor people own a house. And a lot of people did own their house, but it was all an illusion. It was based on debt and malinvestment and just a system that couldn't be sustained. The people who made out a lot were builders and mortgage people and all the rest. And then they started into the speculating and the derivatives, and the whole thing went haywire. They went bankrupt. So what happened? The government comes along. So all those compassionate liberals and others come in and said, oh, we got to help these people, because if we don't take care of them, it might hurt us. So they take all those bad assets and buy them with money they create out of air. So the bad guys get bailed out, and the American people get dumped on, and then they wonder why the middle class is getting wiped out. But it is a characteristic of when you destroy a currency, you systematically destroy the middle class. And if you have a market economy, if you have sound money, the middle class grows and becomes wealthier, and we've experienced that in our country. But now, in these last 10 years, it's been shrinking, these last 4 years especially. So there's reason for us to defend the freedom philosophy. Number one, everybody ought to want to be free, to live their own life, because you have a right to your life, it's a right, and a right to your liberty. And of course, along with that, you ought to have the right to keep what you earn. So this is awfully appealing. But when you see this, it also provides the greatest prosperity. And if you blend this into the important issue of sound money and also the foreign policy, you can put it together and say that the maximum opportunity and chance of us achieving peace and prosperity has to be through a freedom system. And yet today, the worse the economy gets, the more wars we have. And one of the worst things that many of us have been taught, and you probably have heard it in your schools, and your so-called economic classes. But the Depression ended when we got into World War II. Don't ever let them tell you that.